Hi. Um, I'm going to start off by talking about this painting. It's called Monk by the Sea by Caspar David Friedrich, the German Romanticist painter. And to me, this painting really symbolizes man's relationship to the universe. The monk is a small figure in a vast landscape, and this represents our endless fascination and inspiration that we get from existing in nature. One of the fundamental goals of Western thought has been to try to understand nature and to try to uncover the underlying order behind everything around us. The interesting thing about that is we have a very limited means for doing so. We have 5 senses and a limited capacity for thought. So there's this discrepancy between how the world is ordered and how we can actually understand that order. This discrepancy is illustrated in our interventions with nature and the structures that we build on it. This image shows how land was first divided in the U.S. into sellable plots. And as you can see in the bottom right corner, the way that they attempted to do this was by breaking land that had rivers and mountains and streams and forests in it by trying to break that into a very regular rectangular grid. And so there's this kind of juxtaposition of the grid over the organic. And while this may be practical and convenient for us, it's very idealistic. This actually caused a lot of problems because neighbors would start fighting over the ownership of a river that their property lines cut in half. And we still see this today. This is something called the Four Corners, and it's actually a tourist attraction. This girl is in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah all at the same time. And to me, this is a kind of monument to rationality. We're superimposing our ideas onto nature in a kind of an arbitrary way. So you can start to look at any kind of man-made structure and see how that reflects on the ideals of its creators. If you think about a kind of society or civilization that depends on caves for shelter, that tells you a little bit about their understanding of the world and their ability to manipulate it. And then if you contrast that with a type of culture that is able to build igloos as a way of dividing space, that gives you another idea of a different level and a different level of sophistication. Another interesting kind of structure to look at are aqueducts. They're built very rationally, and they're actually a man-made way of replicating a natural function, which nature does with streams and rivers. But you'll be hard pressed to find a stream or river that moves in such a straight line. So nature doesn't conform to our ideals of order, and our ideals of order don't conform to nature's order. The Industrial Revolution is kind of a critical point where we reached a certain level of understanding about chemistry and physics that allowed us to take the things that we were learning about the world and using them to serve our own purposes. The Industrial Revolution is also interesting for inspiring a new kind of architecture that was completely obsessed with functionality and rationalism, whereas the architecture that came before this was heavily invested in decoration and ornament. The architects of the late 1800s and early 1900s were looking at artifacts from the Industrial Revolution, such as grain elevators and planes and automobiles and steam engines, and saying, why can't we use this way of thinking to think about space? Why can't we take what we know about space, take what we know about how people use space, and make that the sole purpose of architecture, as dividing space as into our ideals of order. This kind of architecture is actually responsible for creating the conventions that we all know today. The way that modernists devise of dividing space still exists today, and the kind of projects that I'm interested in are ones that call these conventions to attention and kind of highlight their arbitrary nature. So this is a project that I did, and it's just a a rectangular room, the kind that we've all been in before. But what's interesting about it is that once the viewer enters the room, the back wall actually starts closing in, and the space becomes more intense and smaller and brighter. And then when the viewer leaves, it returns back to its original state. But what I find valuable about this project is that it really makes the viewer think about what we're used to in terms of how we organize space as a culture, and it makes us think about the conventions that exist and calls into nature their value and how we can start to think differently about space. Thanks.